Hey everyone, welcome back. Digital marketing is undergoing its most dramatic transformation as artificial intelligence revolutionizes how we reach and engage audiences online. AI overviews are triggering in 15% of all Google search queries as of October 2025, fundamentally reshaping search visibility. Meanwhile, OpenAI's Atlas browser is challenging how we navigate the internet entirely. How do these shifts affect website design, SEO strategies, and advertising campaigns? What happens when search engines become conversational? Today, I'm joined by Garrett Hammonds, partner and head of marketing for Hammonds Media and Marketing, to explore how AI is transforming our online experiences and discuss practical strategies for adapting your digital marketing approach in this rapidly evolving landscape. To support the show, click on this video and visit chrishood.com/show to subscribe to your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on social media or email me directly at show@chrishood.com. I'm Chris Hood, and let's get connected. Welcome to the show. Garrett, mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on to start off with. It's great to be on the show. I am a digital marketer. I have an agency with my partner and a business partner and life partner, both my wife, Grace. And we've been doing digital marketing for a long time now, but we are based in Norman, Oklahoma, and we do a little bit of everything, but I'd say we specialize in three key areas. One is website development. It's kind of your digital face, so you need to make sure it's looking the way you want it to. SEO, and then digital advertising. So that's those last two are probably my two favorites as I go through. My team is really into some of the website development, but I nerd out at those last two the most.
Well, it's great to have you, and I think you're going to bring an interesting perspective today, because if we target all three of those, website development, SEO, and advertising, I would say that artificial intelligence is disrupting, changing all three of them in some way or another. Are you seeing that?
Absolutely. I mean, we get a new update every single week, every single day sometimes. I was sending you an email just the other day about we have a new browser competitor that's coming out there. OpenAI is now trying to be able to throw their hat in the ring. And you see innovations across platforms where these new competitors are starting to come up in all of these different areas. Webflow is my favorite website developer, setup, and they just launched a whole slew of things connected to their MCP servers and Claude, and being able to do a lot more with AI and being able to create content and edit content. It's all going to change. I mean, SEO, good night. We have so much happening. I even had this internal battle, and me and one of my good friends inside of the industry, we've been talking about these new up and coming platforms like Search Atlas that's arising and giving people like SEMrush for a run, or Ahrefs. And so everything is seeing these rapid changes. But one of the things that I've found the most interesting is through all of that, really some of our core principles, it always stays pretty constant. And that's what I've been trying to tell folks is we're going to have stuff that changes, but we also need to remember the things that don't change as those come along, which is easy to get caught up in the hype.
Yeah, that's a message that I share often, I feel, with a lot of people and businesses when I'm talking with them. And to kind of put that in perspective, if we say that websites are going to fundamentally change, whatever that might be. And I've thought about what a non-website might look like, the interface, the browser, all of these kind of start to change. But at the end of the day, what you're really offering is some sort of insight as to who you are. So you've got some information about yourself, a way for them to contact you, and some sort of onboarding, sales motion, ideally, so that they can purchase your product. And so if we say that, as you were just saying, that ultimately is not going to change, you still need to be able to talk about what you do and who you are and how they can reach out to you. Then how that information kind of comes together in whatever that format is and whatever the interface between us is, that can continuously change. I do tend to agree. Like I said, I talk about it in various ways that the core foundation of your business is not going to adjust much.
Absolutely. From what we're seeing on our side, one of the things that I think is growing to be more and more important, it's always been important, but is especially important nowadays, is really knowing your audience and not just the general idea. We have these ideal customer profiles or personas or whatever we want to call them nowadays. And then we kind of, distribute them between the team. We need to really know how people are making decisions throughout a buyer's journey, what they do for fun, what they may keep in their pockets is a fun exercise I do with some of my clients. And it's not going to tell you everything, but it surprises you sometimes when you think about what would my client keep in their pockets. We have seen this throughout the ages in different forms, but even if we're looking at fairly recent history, you know, stages of awareness have been looked at for a while. Eugene Schwartz, kind of the renowned copywriter in the early, well, mid 20th century, came up with these 5 stages of awareness. And then and it wasn't original to him. He developed it from another model before that, and we've continued to see it change and happen. But the core behind it is, who is our audience? What do they need? And how do they go about reaching those goals? Now that journey's changing, but some of those core principles, those are staying the same.
Yeah, so I just finished the manuscript of my fourth book, and it deals with reinventing basically the customer journey. And I've argued in the book in a lot of different ways that your typical, what we would call a funnel based type of journey, linear model is no longer, doesn't apply anymore to anybody.
Yes.
And I think, two quick things. I want to talk about what's in your pocket, that because that's really brilliant. But I'll start with the awareness piece. Typical journey maps, bow tie, whatever you want to call them, always start with this concept of awareness. They become aware of your product. That's the intention. Now logically, we can understand that they can't buy something from you without becoming aware of you. But I have argued, especially in pretty good detail in my new book, that with AI now, you could skip over awareness, and that we have this compression actually happening where multiple stages are happening in parallel with one another. Things like education about what your product is and a decision making process could happen simultaneously. If you have onboarding, typically onboarding is considered a post sales activity, but we are now seeing that onboarding can happen in parallel before they've even purchased your product. And so all of these different types of ways that we look at what that journey is through through this motion of a linear process is being completely dismantled now because of AI.
Absolutely. And I think that's 100% correct. We have these phases that in an ideal world, we would love to see somebody, they get their education and they become a little bit more aware of the problem. And it's in an ideal world, we would want to feel like we're in control of everything, all, in this really cookie cutter fashion. The truth is that we don't shop that way. We don't think that way anymore. It's totally different because of the technology that is available to us, the AI innovations. We're going to be having AI agents go out and do shopping for us as soon as we know what we want. I think in the future, that'll be interesting to see how maybe that piece develops. We we are creatures of wanting to be able to take shortcuts. We have the quicker we can get something, the better. And the problem that we come across is nowadays we've had this very, especially in content marketing and SEO, had this very like scattershot approach in the industry. It's like let's try and put out as much content as possible everywhere all at once, and then that'll bring people to our website. And people aren't clicking on stuff anymore. They stop at the AI overview. They stop at the summary inside of a closed system that you can't track as well. And so it's fascinating to see how this develops. I think nowadays what we have to do is we have to be more specific. We have to be more contextual to what we're doing and who we're doing it with and what we have to add when it comes to value that nobody else can provide. And that's how we start showing up. And then we pair that with good old fashioned brand building practices, which I also think, especially when we look at a scope of different businesses that are out there, bigger businesses, a lot of the time, we think, oh, this is just a big business thing. Businesses of all sizes have to be able to put time into building their brands. The A inside of EEAT that Google puts out for their content kind of framework is authoritativeness. And we have to be able to build authority that people know us and respect us inside of an industry. So it's interesting. I touched on a lot of things there.
Yeah, the authority thing though is one of those areas where I think AI is having an immense impact on. So I understand that in traditional SEO, I need to prove that I know what I'm talking about so that my website goes up in the rankings so that when you see me, you click on it and you come to my website and I demonstrate that authority, right? There's this kind of a symbiotic relationship between what you're producing and what is out there within the search rankings. However, what we are seeing is that the authority figure within this process is now becoming AI, right? So people actually trust AI more than they trust anything else that they are reading on the internet. And that alone is crazy within, how I think about it. But if you've got an individual who is searching for some sort of solution and AI makes the recommendation for that solution and they have no idea who you are, they have no idea what your brand is, they have no idea what your website is, they have no idea if you are legitimate or not legitimate. But if AI tells them to go buy your product and it pops up in that search engine, odds are you're going to go and act on that and go and buy it because AI told you so. So the authority is less on you to prove that you have authority and more on how are we going to get AI to validate that they are the authoritative figure in this conversation and they've validated our product and brand for us.
That is also wild to me because of the stage that we're at in some of these things too. Because AI gets it wrong a decent amount of the time still. We have these even hallucinated links leading you to 404 pages. But I'm exactly like that. I'll go to I use multiple, generative AI programs at different times and sometimes no rhyme or reason. Chat GPT is my go-to, but I'll use Gemini, I'll use Claude. And whatever it puts out, I'm like, yeah, that's all I need right now. I'm good. And that's how we're processing this stuff. And it will be, I think, a responsibility for us as people to, even as things advance forward with the accuracy and with the continued growth of AI as the authority, to continue to question, critically think, to be creative. We get into these stages where if we even if we're creative with a prompt, if we're creative with how we're writing things, we can lose some of that ingenuity within our thinking processes if we become too reliable on things. And so that'll be really interesting as the authority continues to build in these options that are available for us, how we as the human race respond to it.
Yeah. So OpenAI came out and announced that they have a new browser that they are pushing out to the market. I clearly have some opinions on this one, but I would love to just hear kind of your initial thoughts.
I think that we're seeing a disruptor of a company do disruptive things. I don't know what's going to happen from it. I also have some opinions as we're going through. I don't think that Google's probably in a place where they need to be massively scared or something to that nature. But this is probably one of the bigger moves that we've seen in about a decade from a competitive browser. And what that does say to me is that we are starting to see higher competition levels inside of the space. And we've seen things like this happen before. Microsoft has done their share of things over the years. And of course, they've they've tried to do things with Bing and Microsoft Explorer, Microsoft Edge, and we've seen all kinds of different areas. And OpenAI, is obviously heavily connected to Microsoft. But I think they're the first player in a while that has pushed to try and be the first ones to do things within a space. Google published the paper on transformers, right? Started the movement for LLMs that we have founded today. It's not like they're behind in actual functionality or something like that. But every single time, Google has AI mode that they have, but it's not a whole full blown browser push away from their current search. They still have multiple things going on. And right as Google's doing that, OpenAI says, well, let's make a AI assistant focused browser and try and push that out first. And so it's interesting. This competition level is creating some waves inside of the digital marketing space.
Yeah. Well, I think there's some good and bad and ugly in this process. The good is sort of what you've just outlined. I think additional options within the space, competitive nature, whatever you want to call it, stimulates innovation. It stimulates opportunity for thinking about things in new ways. I could probably sit here and argue that in the next 10 years, we won't have browsers anymore. There won't be such a thing as an interface for web-based content. I think that's going to fundamentally change due to AI over the course, again, of the next 10 years or so, which also then says that, websites and how those, come to existence, I think also probably will start to see some sort of fundamental change over the course of the next 10, 15 years. But all of that I think is good. This helps lead us into that type of change motion. The bad is that, you know, why another browser? Quite honestly, 90% of the world uses Chrome, and the other 10% uses like four other options that are out there. So it's like, I don't know. At some point in time, again, it goes back to I think things are going to just have to change and see where we end up. But I'm not opposed to this in that regards. The ugly, I think, is that I have a genuine concern about the privacy of the system itself. And so if you've got OpenAI who is not shy of capturing anything and everything it can capture, and now it can also capture your history, search, etc., as you are doing this in real time, disguised as providing you with richer experiences, that data goes somewhere. And that data, from purely a privacy and openness perspective, I think is not as secured as I think it needs to be. I think, kind of the one area that I've always thought about is we need to get into not just a privacy conversation, but into a data ownership conversation. I own my data. How can I monetize my own data? You want to know about me? You want to scan my website? You want to use that website information for your training? Well, then pay me for that. You want my search history, you want to know what I've been doing, then pay me for that, right? And I think if we get to this kind of, monetization of our own personal, data our ecosystem, that becomes a lot more interesting. Then people are freely willing to open up whatever they want to open up. But right now, especially when I saw this come out, I'm like, we're in for some really, really interesting data privacy stories coming soon.
Yes, yeah, and it's strange how top of mind it is for people, but not at all.
Yeah.
I was watching a commercial the other day for DuckDuckGo. I was at the gym and it came up on there, and they had the, cameras flying around and following you, and then they blocked them off, and it was like, okay, so they've picked up on this trend that's been here for a while. It's their whole thing of the data privacy piece of things. But then we're just as quick, somebody will be like, protect my privacy. And then they'll go and just give it away for nothing at all. So it's this weird contrast. And I think part of it is awareness levels of, when I have something that's that's doing something for me, I'll give away my stuff and not think about what's happening. And we've seen this for years with pixels on websites, with third party cookies for years, just scraping information. And I know folks who refuse to put pixel tracking on their website because they didn't like that they didn't get paid for their data getting sent back into this other platform. So I'm with you. I would love to see us have more serious conversations in you know the public sphere about what that needs to look like, because we need.
Yeah, Microsoft recently came out with a change to their privacy, and they've clearly said that, we are going to train your information on our AI, your data on our AI. And there's a little switch there that says, turn this off, right? I do not authorize you to train your AI on my data, but there's a catch. Small little writing underneath the button says you can only turn this off for 3 times, and it only lasts for a week. So you can turn it off for a week
Goodness.
and then it automatically turns back on. Then you have to go and turn it back off again. And you can only do that for 3 times before it stays on permanently. And so, yeah, I think a lot of these companies are also pushing those limits, of what they feel is acceptable so that they can get more data into their training models.
Yeah, and I'll admit freely that people like me, people who do advertising and do marketing, that we're a big piece of the problem, because we want all of the hyper targeting that we can get. And I actually, one of the things that I think it will be more important, because our models of data collection are changing, and they're going to change, and we're going to have to pivot at some point in time. But I'm really pushing folks towards trying to have more contextual marketing models, even online, where, if you're selling a sports product, why in the world wouldn't you want to go to a website related to sports to be able to sell the sports product? And so we have that in all different types of platforms, programmatic formats of advertising that we can go through. But it's I would say a secondary thought. We're much more interested in who are my in-market audiences, what are their different individual affinities, how can I pinpoint, this very little thing. We forget targeting in and of itself, it's a hunting term. It comes from an industry where we're trying to hunt you down. The way that advertising platforms and most digital platforms, that are these inside of the big tech space, get their money is they monetize through the data. And so they're going to try and pull in as much as they can if advertisers will pay them for it, and they'll do it gladly.
Yeah. 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 And if they can figure out what's in your pocket, then they're going to
Huh?
sell it. That's exactly it. On that note, again, one more sort of reference back to my new book is that I've introduced this concept of a pre journey as well as a post journey. And the pre journey concept is that you have a story before you enter into the ecosystem of what you're looking for. So, for your purposes like sports, well, what has led them to start searching for sports equipment, right? I've got a son who is in, baseball. Now I've used the story where a woman who needs to go get new glasses and books an appointment to check her eyes. Well, how did she get there? Well, what if she went to the DMV and failed her driver's test, right? Like there are these stories that we can begin to imagine that oftentimes we don't. We think about, the rationale for them coming to us, but we don't paint these stories that happen before and even after they've engaged with us. And that type of data is increasingly becoming more available, which is going to provide you with the ability to better develop those advertising strategies because you can pre-target them before they start to build that interest.
And that goes right in line with that concept of we have to know our people. We have to know who we're serving. Part of that is knowing ourselves. Why do we exist in something? Even mentioning with the Atlas browser, why another browser? Well, we know what they get out of it. But for the users themselves, what's the reasoning behind their decisions and the journey that got there? And I think we have to focus in on how do we, on an enterprise level or all across the spectrum, how do we connect in a genuine and authentic way with our customers? And part of that's just having real conversations, and that can look at a number of different ways, but we have to actually learn about their stories and know some of those different steps that it took to get there.
Yeah. Well, fabulous conversation. How can people get in touch with you?
Well, so my agency is named Hammonds Media and Marketing, or HMM for short, and we kind of had a running joke that it was kind of that thought, the sound you made when you had a exciting thought. So we would say marketing that makes you think. So you can find us there, hmm.agency. That's our website. And we really do want to be able to create thought-provoking marketing. So if that sounds like it's you, somebody who's trying to be able to figure out these next steps along the way, find us there. You can reach me at my email, garrett@hmm.agency, or you can find me on LinkedIn at just search for Garrett Hammonds, and I should pop right up.
And I'll be sure to share those links with everybody in the show notes. Once again, Garrett, appreciate it so much. Very interesting conversation.
Great talking with you. Thank you for having me on.
And for everyone else who is watching, don't forget to hit subscribe and follow us on social media. Until next week, thanks for watching.